Welcome back to High Class Gear. Get yourself ready for another great video. You won't find anyone with more realistic and intriguing stories from the big 80s and the weird 90s than this channel. If you came here looking for something strange, creepy, car chases, police fights, stupid mistakes that came back to get me, or even for a little bit of knowledge, you've definitely come to the right place. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you stay up to date with all the great content coming your way. The following story takes place in the year 1982, when I was 8 years old. I just finished my first class of the day, and it was 9 a.m. My mother was now putting on her apron and getting ready to head out to the first of her 2 jobs. My father had only left about 2 hours ago, sharing a bowl of cream of wheat with extra butter, milk, and sugar with me. I started reading much earlier because of my desire to be like my older sister and brother, but I also loved the idea of trying out different books. My mother expertly coached me in a few different languages and always gave me a reassuring kiss on the cheek or a shoulder rub when I did well. If I fell short, she would always explain why I was falling short. If it was consistent mess-ups, she would hold her slipper in her hand as a sign that I'd done enough mistakes and needed to clean up my act. I can laugh about it now, but in 1982, it was the attitude adjuster that kept you working hard. My only shortcoming in reading English, my mother told me, was that I would use a bookmark and move it down the page over each sentence, so I could read line by line. She'd told me to break this habit, but I struggled greatly with it. My language reading, speaking, and writing were pretty solid, but I often needed help with my math. On the weekends, I'd go to my grandparents' house and get tutored in beginning algebra and my times tables by my grandfather. He had this huge chalkboard where he would write out the problems and then he'd solve them. After that, he'd write out one for me and then have me solve it. I'd love it when I was handed the chalk and commanded to write while my other cousins were seated at the kitchen table that had been transformed into the school table. If I got it right, I'd be praised, but if I fell short, I'd have to practice the correct answer dozens of times. And let's not forget my grandmother constantly telling me when she taught me, "Don't forget to show your work. It's not enough to know the answer. You have to show how you got it, and that you understand why the answer is what it is." To me, showing your work was more hassle. Why must I show the work when I got the answer? But I think I knew why. I had the type of mind where sometimes I could guess a correct answer, just by pure luck. I hadn't learned it, I could just guess patterns. My grandmother wanted me to not depend on the guessing game, because there would be times in life where you had to know and understand and not just hope that you got it right by pure luck. My mother advised me to not forget about taking out the trash before she left, and to vacuum and mop the kitchen floor before my uncle came to pick me up in the afternoon. I stared with admiration at my mother while she reached over to grab her Dr. Brown's orthopedic shoes and slipped them on over her socked feet. She wore these thick socks. I didn't know how my mother was able to work 2 jobs like my dad and also keep her orthopedic shoes looking so white and fresh. Whenever I had anything white, I would come home with it scuffed, torn, or with grass stains of some sort. I wasn't a dirty kid. I was just really active and didn't understand that white attracts dirt, and that I had to be on my best behavior to keep it looking spotless. I got up from the little desk in my room and headed to the kitchen to make myself a bowl of cereal. I'd had some cream of wheat, but I still felt hungry a few hours later. Once in the kitchen, I grabbed a bowl out of the cabinet and a spoon from the drawer and set about looking for what cereal I would have. When I looked in the cabinet below the kitchen counter next to the Tupperware, I saw what I wanted: sugar corn pops. I fantasized about filling my bowl to the brim with the corn pops and then only pouring in enough milk so that they could pop at me. They tasted better when they were crunchy, so you didn't add too much milk. Soggy corn pops tasted like sweet Elmer's glue. Literal Elmer's glue. I poured out my portion of cereal into the bowl, and then thought of another plan. What if I instead grabbed a Tupperware container with a larger volume and put it in there? I could get in more cereal and more milk. I took out the plastic container and transferred the cereal across and was pleasantly surprised I had more space for corn pops. I promptly poured more in and then added the milk before putting it back in the fridge. Next, I headed over to the couch and turned on the television looking for my favorite show at that point. Speed Racer finished at 6 in the morning. The only thing that could be left was Starblazers, and the theme music had just started. Yes, it's on. My mother walked into the living room and adjusted her work scarf before shooting me a brief and pleasant look and saying, "Don't eat all the cereal. You'll just be sugared up and then you won't be able to eat lunch at the family house." She nodded, and I nodded too. She then walked through the hallway and back to her room to get a few more things ready, and as was her custom, she would give me the rundown about how the day was going to go. She'd arrive at work, set up her station, she'd call me at around 12 p.m. to see if I was still at home. If so, she'd tell me about the plate covered in saran wrap in the refrigerator that I would take out and warm up in the oven while waiting for my uncle to arrive sometime later. If the phone rang with no answer, or the answering machine got it, she would then call the family house and check that I'd eaten, done my work, and then what time her and my father would arrive to have dinner with the whole family. Then afterwards, we would head home. The times varied only slightly, but I think my mother liked to go through this just to have conversation with me. And also, I was such a troublemaking kid. It was a reminder that kept me on track. Before I considered doing something, I would sometimes look up at the clock, then I would remember. I better not do that. Mom will be calling soon, my internal good guy would warn me. It worked most of the time. I got up from the couch to put my now empty Tupperware container in the sink. I had drained it of cereal and milk. That should hold me until lunch. And I've got some homework my mom left me, I thought to myself. I wanted to get the container and spoon in the sink and get back just in time to see Firestar activate the wave motion gun on the ship. This was my favorite part of Starblazers. Just as I was about to sit down, I thought I heard the squelch of a walkie-talkie. But it couldn't be. Mine are switched off and my mom didn't play with any of my toys. Did they have one next door, I wondered? The answer came by the front door of my townhouse being smashed open and men running inside of the house with all kinds of protective gear. What in the hell is going on? Our door wasn't wood. Otherwise it would have split in two and sent splinters everywhere. Instead it was metal. So it got dented and the men that came in had battering rams, black jackets, face visors and body armor. They looked like the pictures of National Socialist stormtroopers I'd seen in my Time Life Great History books collection. My mother screamed and ran from her bedroom into the living room with me, and the men stood in front of us, weapons drawn. Their faces were covered with these opaque black visors, and it made them each look like Darth Vader clones. I was wondering, was this some kind of Star Wars and National Socialist costume party, and they'd gone to the wrong house. They'd quickly state their business, pointing their weapons to the floor. I could see their eyes looking at me. They were cold, cruel, and authoritarian. They told my terrified mother and I that we'd been committing a crime, we'd been homeschooling, and every child had a right to an American education. And if I didn't take advantage of the said right, I'd be taken into foster care where I could truly receive the education and culture that would civilize me and make me a good member of society. "This is America, goddammit," one of them proclaimed with both pride and fury. "And children belong in school getting the best education on this earth." He ended his declaration by fanning the air with his gloved hand. They made it very clear that if we did not get registered with the nearest school and get me enrolled in the coming 2 weeks that they'd be back, and this time they'd take me and arrest my mother and father. They weren't asking us. They were telling us. This was not a negotiation or a request. They were making demands. And then, they were gone. They didn't even fix the broken door, the doorknob or the dent in the door. The outside air rushed into our once tranquil home. My mother stayed home from work that day and called my father back. He came back to the house in a flash, and they had an emergency meeting regarding me. After hours of what I called big people's talk, they settled upon the point that I would have to go into the United States school system. When they came and sat down with me and explained in detail what was going to happen, it still didn't fully register. I had a large extended family, 5 hours of school every day with curriculum language learning, but they wanted more, they demanded more. As it got closer, they said, they would explain more to me, and what protocols I should observe in order to protect myself from some of the more scary things I might encounter in the outside world. They told me not to worry, and no matter what, they would always be with me. Each day we would sit down and talk about what happened at outside school that day. We would do what we always did, and that was be a family. I guess what I learned that day was that no matter the problem, if you have a good family, you'll find a way to pull through your problems. And no system, no matter how organized and how much fear they try to pump into you, will ever be able to break that strong bond. I also learned that there are evil men in the world that are so intoxicated with power that they can't wait to use it on those they believe to be weaker than them. There was no need to apologize to those under your authority, to respect their morals, habits, family, home, or even their personal space. When you're in charge, that's it. You get to do what you want, no matter who it tramples on. Your inalienable rights take precedence over everyone else. And I was about to find that out soon enough when I left my house for the outside school. If you enjoy these videos and what we do here, subscribe to the High Class Gear channel, give us a like, and hit the notification bell so you always get updates on new content every week. Stay safe out there.